Sleep in a Roman villa didn't come all at once. It drifted in like incense, slowly, in wisps, between dinner and darkness. The sun had long disappeared behind the hills of Latium. What remained was the hush of marble cooling and lamps being lit one by one. Olive oil flickered behind clay and bronze. I had been staying in the villa for 3 days, invited as a guest. Not important enough to dine with the masters, but trusted enough to stay. And it was night again. The slaves had finished washing the platters. The dogs had settled near the atrium. A slow breeze moved through the colonnades, brushing the vines that curled near the garden's edge. I sat on a low bench near the impluvium, the rain basin in the center of the courtyard. It no longer held water, only silence and moonlight. There was no rush to bed. That wasn't the Roman way. Sleep arrived as a companion, not a command. It was coaxed, not caught. I listened. Cicadas sang from the fig trees beyond the walls. Somewhere down the corridor, soft, voices whispered in Latin, verses or gossip, I couldn't tell. The candle beside me melted into the edge of the table. Its light stretched thin across the mosaic floor, tracing the face of a dolphin in tiles worn by centuries of steps. The villa was quiet now, but not empty. Every stone held breath. Every doorway remembered footsteps. I wondered what dreams passed through these walls, what lives had slept here before my own. Inside, the cubiculum waited. A small room with a narrow bed of rope and wool, a bronze lamp, and little else. I wasn't ready yet. There was something about the hush that held me still. A reverence not for gods, but for the slow exhale of the day. In the kitchen, a slave extinguished the last flame. A whisper of smoke curled into the air, then vanished. And in the garden, under the stars, the villa exhaled. So did I. Sleep would come soon. But first, I wanted to remember how the night began. The room was small, not cramped, just sufficient. A narrow space tucked between the peristyle and the outer corridor. Stone walls softened by plaster, and a single wooden beam above, stained with time. The cubiculum. In Rome, sleep had its place, and this was it. There was a bed, of course, a simple frame of wood, bound with leather straps that creaked gently when touched. On top, a thin mattress stuffed with straw and wool, covered in woven linen, not soft by our standards, but not cruel either. A bronze oil lamp sat on a low table. Its flame still flickered, casting long shadows across the far wall. The shape of a curtain's edge, the arc of the door frame, my own silhouette, bending forward to sit. There were no windows, only a narrow slit high in the wall open to the garden's air. Through it came the scent of rosemary and wet earth. It was silent, except for the distant chirp of crickets and the slow stretch of the bed settling beneath me. Romans didn't treat sleep like an escape. It was part of life, structured, necessary, private. And here, it came without indulgence. No pillows beyond a simple roll of cloth. No blankets thick enough to weigh you down. Only what was needed. Nothing more. I lay back slowly, letting the linen cool against my arms. The ceiling above was plain, not frescoed like the dining room, not gilded like the atrium, just stone. Honest. I listened. To the rustle of leaves beyond the walls, to the breath of another sleeper in the next room, to the faint hiss of oil feeding flame. This was not luxury, but it was enough. Romans, I'd learned, often rose in the middle of the night. They called it the first sleep and second sleep, a natural division, when silence deepened and dreams wandered far enough to wake you. In that gap, some wrote, some prayed, some stared at the lamp, like I was doing now. I thought of home, of sleep I once knew, of down mattresses and ticking clocks, of silence that was not shared but isolated. Here, everything was shared, even the night. The walls breathed with you. The air belonged to the house, not just to you. Even your sleep felt borrowed. The flame dimmed slightly. I adjusted the wick. The bronze lamp hissed gently in thanks. I wasn't yet tired, but I was ready. And that, in Rome, was often enough. I closed my eyes, not to drift, but to listen deeper. And somewhere between oil and stone, linen and breath, sleep began to arrive. Dreams in the Roman world were not private. They were messages, warnings, gifts from the gods. To sleep was to open yourself, not only to rest, but to revelation. I didn't dream often, but that night, in the cubiculum, the air felt thick with waiting. The oil lamp had gone out hours ago. Only the faint scent of burnt olive lingered. I lay still, eyes closed, yet not asleep. The linen scratched gently against my legs. The mattress creaked once as I shifted, and then, nothing. Not silence, but fullness. The kind of quiet that listens back. Dreams came slowly. First, I saw stone steps, damp with mist. Then a figure, faceless, wrapped in wool, moving down a long corridor lit by torches. I knew it was a dream because I could hear my own breath inside it. The Romans believed dreams came in the second sleep, after the first had worn off the day's noise and left you raw. This was that. In my dream, the villa was empty. The atrium was filled with water. Reflected stars floated on its surface, though the sky above was black. I stepped into it, not afraid, just curious. Then I woke. Not with a jolt, just a breath. The kind that returns you slowly to your own skin. The air in the cubiculum was cooler, now. The slit in the wall let in a hint of night wind. Somewhere, a night bird called. I sat up, eyes adjusting to the dark. Nothing had changed, and yet, everything had. Romans often consulted dream interpreters. Even emperors sent messages to temples asking what their visions meant. There were books, whole volumes, explaining symbols, omens, illusions. But I didn't need a priest to tell me what I felt, only this. The dream had reminded me I was here, alive, waiting, listening. I lay back down, slower this time, and let the memory of the dream press softly against my ribs. Maybe it was just sleep. Maybe it was something older. A whisper from the stone. A breath from the house. Or maybe, just maybe, it was Rome herself, still speaking after. All this time, I slept again. No more dreams that I remember. But I woke with the feeling that I had been somewhere. And that was enough. Midnight in a Roman villa was not silent. It breathed, whispered, shifted. Sleep had not fully taken everyone. Some servants still moved in the back rooms. A slave stepped softly to tend the embers in the kitchen hearth, careful not to wake the coals too loudly. Footsteps on mosaic, bare, light, familiar. The columns groaned, just a little. Wood expanding with the cool, stone settling deeper into the earth. I lay on my side in the cubiculum, awake again. Not restless, just alert. Sleep had come and gone once. Now it hovered. From the atrium, the sound of water dripping. The impluvium still gathered the sky even on dry nights. Somewhere water had condensed, waited, and let go. Drop. Pause. Drop. It measured time better than a clock. Owls called from the fig trees. A pair. Maybe more. Their low voices passed over the roof tiles and into the garden. A donkey brayed in the distance. A gate creaked, then quiet again. The villa was not alone in the countryside. There were other homes, other fires, other sleepless thoughts. But we felt alone, wrapped in the thin hush of tradition and stone. I sat up, wrapped my tunic tighter. The bed had left soft creases along my arm. The oil lamp was out. I didn't relight it. The dark was kind tonight. A breeze moved through the slit in the wall, carrying scents, olive wood, warm dust, the last trace of someone's dinner. I listened. In another cubiculum, a voice mumbled, words in sleep, not loud enough to understand, but familiar enough to calm. A servant yawned behind a door, a soft creak followed by the hush of wool being adjusted. I began to count. Not sheep, but sounds. The owl, too. The breath of the garden. The shift of straw beneath my mattress. A plate rattling in the kitchen. The drip from the impluvium. My own heartbeat. It was a lullaby in fragments. Romans didn't need silence to rest. They accepted the night as it came, with its creaks and whispers and unpredictable breaths. Even the gods, they believed, moved differently after dark. I lay back, once more, letting the mattress settle beneath me. The linen clung to my legs. My head found the same shallow pillow. I watched the ceiling fade into softness. No stars here, only the imagination of them. And the villa sang on, quietly, beautifully. Sleep in a Roman villa did not begin by accident. It was prepared, like a meal, like a prayer. Each evening followed a rhythm, not rigid, but familiar. First, the meal. Always before dusk, olives, bread, garum, figs, wine, diluted and warm. Then stories, myths, gossip, memories, shared in low voices under painted ceilings. Laughter was soft, never sharp, the kind that floats between bites and never needs to echo. When dinner faded, the rituals began. The slaves cleared bowls in silence, stepping over floor, mosaics with practiced ease. Torches were extinguished one by one. The air darkened gradually, as if night had hands. Some retired to their chambers. Others lingered in the peristyle to walk off the wine. I stayed in the corner of the garden, watching the shadows climb the columns. One of the older servants brought me a small bowl of water, for the hands, for the face, for memory. I dipped my fingers and let the coolness remind me of rivers, of simpler nights. The host's wife lit incense at the household altar, the Bawi, Lararium. A niche in the wall, carved with care. Inside, tiny statues, lares, penates, and a painted offering tray. She whispered something, not a full prayer, but a gesture. Gratitude, perhaps, or hope. A child placed a crumb of bread beside the flame. A small act, watched but not corrected. This was how sleep was welcomed, not demanded, not chased, but invited. The beds were simple, wood frames, woven rope, straw mattress with linen tucked tightly, a blanket of wool, folded once at the foot. I had no pillow, only a rolled cloth. But I didn't mind. The cubiculum smelled faintly, of ash and fig leaves. Outside, the frogs had joined the night chorus. I returned to the room slowly, took off my sandals and set them beside the door, folded my tunic neatly, unrolled the cloth. My body knew what to do, even without instruction. Lie down. Stretch. Breathe. The ritual was complete. And though the world was ancient and strange, this part, the ending of the day, felt familiar. Like I had done it 1,000 times in other lives. Like sleep remembered me. They didn't glow brightly. They didn't shine like stars. But the lamps of the Roman villa were never meant to dazzle. They were meant to watch. Each one was small. Clay, bronze, sometimes carved ivory. Their mouths shaped like petals. Their bellies full of oil. Wicks of linen twisted tight. A single flame. Steady. Modest. In the cubiculum, mine had burned low before I slept. When I woke in the middle of the night, its light was barely a breath. It cast shadows along the wall, soft silhouettes of a jug, the bed frame. My own stillness didn't move to refill it. The dimness felt kind, protective. Romans believed that even during sleep, light should not fully leave the room. It guided dreams, guarded souls, kept away the things that drifted in darkness. The household had dozens of lamps, some built into the walls, some hung from chains, others placed on low tables near the bed. Each had been lit earlier in the evening by a servant walking slowly, carefully, with a jar of oil and a quiet rhythm. The villa glowed like memory. Now, near midnight, most lamps had burned down. But here and there, a faint orange halo remained, a stubborn guardian resisting the pull of night. I sat up, stretched, and watched the flame dance in my own lamp. It moved like a small thought, trying not to disappear. There was comfort in that. Outside, another lamp flickered from the corridor. Someone else was awake. Maybe a servant checking on the garden door. Maybe just another sleeper between breaths. The Romans didn't fear the night, but they respected it. Lamps stayed lit not just for utility, but for ceremony, to remind the walls that people still lived, within them, to keep the house breathing. The lamp beside me gave a final stretch of light, then dimmed again. I leaned forward and adjusted the wick. It hissed, glowed, returned. It felt like a heartbeat restarting. I had seen lamps like this in museums, behind glass, labeled and numbered. But this one was real, warm, imperfect, and it was mine. For this night, at least, I whispered something. Just to it. Not a prayer, not a thought, just sound to keep it company. The flame wavered, listened. Romans would sometimes place lamps in tombs to guide the dead, to honor sleep that would not end. But this was not that. This was living light, watching over dreams that still had mornings ahead. I lay back, let the glow touch my face one last time, and I slept, knowing I was not alone. In every room there were gods, not always grand or golden, often just small figurines, worn smooth by touch. Lares and penates, household protectors. They lived in corners, in niches, beside the door, above the hearth. In the cubiculum, there was a painted tile with a faded figure. Mercury, I think. His staff half lost to time, his sandals winged. He watched me as I slept. Or perhaps I watched him. Romans didn't separate sleep from belief. The gods were part of the rhythm. You dined with them. You bathed under their gaze, and when you slept, they remained. I lit the oil lamp each evening not just to see, but because it was custom to leave light for the gods. They might pass through the room, and no guest should be left in the dark. One of the servants had explained it to me that way. The gods are like visitors, she said. You keep a place for them just in case. There was a statue of a dog near the garden, carved from stone, eyes worn blank. The child of the house said it guarded dreams, not from monsters, but from forgetfulness. I liked that. As I lay in bed, I tried to remember all the names I'd learned. Juno, Minerva, Somnus, the god of sleep himself. Not feared, not begged, just welcomed. Romans didn't pray loudly before bed. They nodded, lit a flame, offered a word, a crumb, a thought. In the atrium, the household altar stood quiet. A flicker of red still glowed beneath the ash. Tiny statues stood in pairs. One held wheat, another, a horn of plenty. I imagined the masters of the villa stopping, there before sleep, not to plead, but to acknowledge, to say in silence, "We are still here." I whispered to the figure on the tile, not a prayer, just a sentence to place into the quiet. "Keep watch while I wander." The wind moved through the upper slit in the wall. The flame danced once, then steadied. Maybe that was enough. There were stories, too many to recall, about gods who spoke in dreams, warnings, promises, laughter, silence. Sometimes people traveled to temples just to sleep. Incubation, they called it. To dream in sacred spaces, to wake with clarity. Even emperors did it. But not tonight. Tonight, I only felt presence. Like being in a room with someone you love, without speaking. I didn't feel holy. I didn't feel watched. I just felt held. The linen rose and fell with my breath. The house shifted around me, and the gods remained, not judging, just staying. A kind of peace came with that. Not joy, not comfort. Something smaller. Something quiet. I traced the edge of the blanket with my thumb, listening to the silence. It wasn't empty. It was shared. Perhaps the gods weren't above us. Perhaps they were beside us, in the clay, in the oil, in the warmth left in the bed from the day's sun. I didn't expect answers, only rest. And under the gaze of forgotten deities, I found it. The lamp burned low. My eyes grew heavy, and sleep, like a blessing whispered in Latin, returned. Later, I would hear others speak of the gods as thunderous things, commanding, dramatic, feared. But here, they were different. Soft, patient, present. The gods of the villa didn't need temples. They needed space, respect, a nod before the candle dimmed. I wondered if they preferred this kind of worship. The quiet kind. The kind that lives in habit, not in him. Maybe the gods grew tired of glory. Maybe they too sought rest. And so they stayed with us. Not to rule, but to remain. And in the room where I slept, they did. Word count placeholder. At breakfast the next day, I asked one of the elder servants if she ever dreamed of the gods. She paused, placing a fig on a plate, then said, "No, but I feel them." I nodded. I understood. Some things aren't seen. They're sensed. She told me a story of her grandmother, who had kept a small figure of Somnus by her bedside. Not in marble, not in bronze, just clay, shaped by hand. Every night, she'd dab a drop of lavender oil onto its head before sleep. She said it helped him find her faster. The woman smiled. I liked that too. In the villa, the gods didn't arrive with thunder. They arrived like breath, subtle, soft, expected. Even the walls seemed to know them. Later that afternoon, I visited the lararium again. Alone this time. The ash had been swept. The statues had been turned just slightly, facing inward, like guests, whispering. I left a sprig of rosemary on the tray. Not because I believed it mattered, but because it felt right. That night, I slept more deeply. And I dreamed of figures in white, seated at the foot of my bed. Not watching, just being. In the morning, I couldn't remember their faces, but I remembered the feeling, like having guardians made of light and silence. I never asked anyone else if they'd had the same dream. Some things are better left unspoken. But I looked differently at the gods after that. Not as statues, not as ideas, but as presences that live in rhythm, in oil, in footsteps, in sleep. They never needed prayers, only attention. And in that villa, I gave them both. I woke before sound. The villa was still sleeping. Even the birds had yet to begin. There was a faint shift in the darkness, not brightness, but dilution. The edges of the cubiculum softened. Shadows lost their certainty. I remained in bed, unmoving, letting the first light arrive without resistance. In Roman homes, morning began slowly, not with alarm, but with awareness. The slit in the wall high above the bed now glowed faintly, the sky beyond it turning from deep slate to worn silver. Light passed through stone like breath through lips. I listened. No footsteps yet. No water poured. No whispers. Only light. The linen blanket had slipped during the night. I found its edge and pulled it back, careful not to disturb the silence. The mattress creaked in protest, then settled again. Outside, the garden still held its breath. I imagined the dew on the leaves, the steam rising from the grass when sun would finally reach it. Romans did not spring from sleep. They unfurled from it, like scrolls. Slowly, thoughtfully. Soon the first movements began. A door creaked far down the corridor. Then the clink of pottery, someone preparing morning wine or water. The day stirred gently, like a child reluctant to rise. I sat up. My feet touched the cold tile floor. Familiar now. Grounding. I reached for my tunic, still folded where I had left it. The gesture felt sacred. The lamp was out. Its wick curled, stiff. I let it be. The gods, I thought, were already awake, the slit above welcomed more sky. Faint light stretched down the wall. It touched the foot of the bed, then the edge of my hand. The world was returning. In Rome, morning was not greeted with fanfare. It was accepted, like a gift you receive each day, unsure if it's the last. Servant passed the doorway, carrying bread wrapped in linen. He glanced inside, saw me awake, and nodded. No words, just a shared truth. The day had begun. I stood, slowly. My joints answered back. The linen rustled behind me. The stone walls watched, as they always did. I walked to the edge of the room and placed my hand on the wall. Cool, solid, eternal. Outside, a bird called once, then again, and another answered. The villa breathed in. So did I. Sleep had ended, not suddenly but with grace. I didn't rush. Romans rarely did in the early hours. The hearth in the kitchen was likely being rekindled now. Someone would be grinding grain for the morning meal. Someone else sweeping the colonnade stones with a worn straw broom. Every action slow, rhythmic, remembered. In the atrium, light would creep over the impluvium, casting ripples on the walls. The water there had likely cooled through the night, and would now reflect a mirror of sky. I imagined the masters of the house still sleeping, their chambers shaded by heavy curtains. Even, they were allowed softness in the earliest hour. The garden would wake next. The fig trees, olive branches, low shrubs holding scent and shadow. Cicadas were still silent, but not for long. I returned to the bedside and poured the last of the water. From the ceramic jug into a small bowl, it was cold. I dipped my fingers and touched my eyes, my lips, my chest. Not ritual, habit, Roman, human. This was a different kind of silence, not absence, but peace. Somewhere, a chair scraped. Footsteps now, not hurried, measured. The house remembered its rhythm, and I remembered mine. When I stepped into the corridor, the air smelled of olive oil and stone, the scent of warmth before fire, of purpose before speech. And all around me, the light, the first real light of the day, passed through the villa's bones, through brick and mosaic and marble, through time itself. I thought, this is how Rome wakes, not with conquest, but with breath. And I was here to witness it. The Roman pillow was not what I expected. It wasn't soft, it wasn't large. It didn't invite the head so much as accept it. A rolled bundle of cloth or leather, filled with straw, wool, or feathers if you were lucky. Sometimes wood, sometimes nothing. Mine was modest. A cylindrical shape, wrapped in linen, bound tight with cord at both ends. It had the firmness of certainty. No fluff, no false comfort. And yet, it served. I remember lying down the first night, expecting to adjust, to fold, to shift. But there was nothing to shift. It was what it was. Romans didn't believe comfort should be indulgent. The body should rest. Yes, but with discipline. Softness was for poetry, not posture. Still, the pillow grew familiar. My head began to shape to it, or perhaps the other way around. It no longer resisted me. It became part of the bed, of the room, of the rhythm. Each night, I lay upon it and found the same sensation, support without surrender. I imagined the others in the villa, masters, servants, guests, all sharing this pact of posture, not to fight sleep, but to meet it properly. Some pillows were scented, I learned, stuffed, with dried lavender, crushed bay leaf, mint, not for dreams, but for the air itself. So even as you slept, your breath remembered the garden. Mine had no scent, but I pretended, inhaled slowly and let the imagination do the rest. Sometimes I missed my own pillow from home. Broad, warm, indulgent, but I no longer craved it. Not here. Here, I understood restraint. There was something sacred about resting your head on the same form each night, unchanged, like speaking the same word before sleep, a ritual in shape. The pillow did not sink. It did not hold secrets. It simply waited. When I woke in the night, I would reach for it. Not because it had moved, but because I had. Its presence reassured me. The room might change in darkness, but the pillow remained. One morning, I asked a servant if he ever used more than one. He laughed. One? If you have a pillow, you are lucky. He slept on folded cloth, sometimes on his arm, sometimes on nothing at all. I nodded, then touched the pillow that had become mine and felt it differently, not as a thing I lacked softness in, but as a thing I had the privilege to name mine. I watched as others rested on stone, on steps, on benches. They did not complain. Rest was not a place, it was a practice. The Romans knew this. A senator could sleep like a soldier. A child could sleep on marble and dream in gold. It wasn't about cushioning. It was about rhythm, habit, repetition. Even the gods, I thought, must rest on things harder than we do. Later, I saw a dog curl on the floor near the atrium. Its head rested on a folded tunic, offered by someone unseen. And in that moment, I understood the pillow better than ever. It was not for comfort. It was for alignment. Of body, of mind, of breath. At night, when the villa dimmed and the footsteps faded, I would return to the cubiculum and the pillow would be waiting. Silent. Still. Faithful. The mattress might shift. The walls might creak. The lamp might flicker. But the pillow would remain. The Romans built aqueducts to move water, arches to hold stone, and pillows to hold sleep. Briefly, deliberately. I lay down again, pressed my head gently, and let it remind me where I was. in a room that was not mine, on a bed I had not chosen, in a time not my own, but with a pillow that no longer felt foreign. I closed my eyes, and sleep accepted me again. I don't remember all the dreams, but some stayed. Not as stories, not with plots, just fragments, like bits of fabric from a robe I once wore in a dream and never touched again. One was of walking down a hallway that never ended, its walls lined with scrolls that whispered, not words I could hear, but sounds I somehow understood. Another was of water, still, deep, with stars floating on its surface. I stepped into it. The stars didn't scatter. They welcomed me. Romans believed dreams were more than accidents of the mind. They were messages, visits, sometimes warnings. The gods spoke in them. The dead, the future. But not all dreams had voices. Some had only presence. I once dreamed I was back in the cubiculum, but the bed floated. Not above the floor, above time. I could see the villa below me, the city beyond, the hills of Latium curling, like waves. The bed rocked gently, and no one looked up. When I awoke, I wrote that one down. In the villa, some servants kept dream journals, scraps of wax tablet beside their sleeping mats. Even those who couldn't read had stories to tell at breakfast. One girl told me she dreamed of a goat who followed her all night, never spoke, never blinked, but always stayed beside her. She said it meant protection. Another boy dreamed of flying, not with wings, but by breathing differently. He swore the air lifted him if he exhaled at the right moment. I believed him. No one mocked dreams here. Even the absurd ones were honored. After all, dreams were shared with the gods. In Rome, there were priests who interpreted dreams. Temples where people slept only to seek visions, called incubation. They would lie on stone, offer incense, and wake with answers, or more questions. But in the villa, dreams came without incense, without ceremony, only sleep, oil lamps, cool linen. Sometimes I dreamed in Latin, sometimes in a language I didn't recognize. Once, I dreamed in silence, and that was the loudest of all. The silence in that dream pressed against me like fog, soft but full of weight. I woke with a tear on my cheek and no sorrow in my heart. Not all dreams made sense. Not all needed to. One morning, the master of the house asked if I had slept. Well, I said yes, then paused. I dreamed I was being watched by an olive tree. He nodded once. They see more than they say. It was enough. I kept that dream. Like a coin in my pocket I never spent. Another dream returned more than once. A hand reaching through a curtain. Never touching, never withdrawing. Just waiting. I never saw who it belonged to. Maybe that's what some dreams are. Outstretched hands from another world. Not meant to grab, only to remind us we're not alone. Sometimes I woke confused. Not by the content, but by the feeling. Joy without cause. Fear without image. Romans believed dreams could be carried through the day, and I did carry them, in my stride. In my glance at the altar, in the way I lit my lamp with more reverence. Some dreams didn't fade. They waited in the corners of my mind until night returned. Then unfolded again like parchment touched by warmth. I stopped trying to explain them. I just welcomed them. Like travelers. Some stayed longer than others, but each left something behind. A whisper, a rhythm, a name I'd forgotten by morning. The gods, I think, watched through them. Or maybe they listened. And as long as I dreamed, truly dreamed, I believed. They stayed near, even now, years later, when I close my eyes in unfamiliar rooms. Some of those dreams return, unchanged, patient, and I let them stay. Romans understood what we often forget. Sleep doesn't always come in one piece. They called it the first sleep and the second sleep, divided by a space, a hush, a pause in the middle of night. And in that quiet, between two dreams, something else happened. I woke one night to find the lamp still flickering. The flame was small but alive, like it had been waiting. Not for me exactly, just for something. The villa was hushed, not silent, never silent, but still, soft. No footsteps, no owls. Just the occasional crack of wood cooling, a sigh from the wall. I sat up, not startled. Simply aware. I hadn't dreamed. Or maybe I had, but the dream had stepped out before I could catch it. My body was not tired. My mind was not racing. I was just in between, and the Romans would have called this natural. Many rose in the middle of the night, not out of insomnia, but rhythm, to sip water, to stoke the fire, to think. Some prayed, some wrote, some simply sat. I chose to listen. The flame bent left, then right, then stilled. A moth tapped against the wall and vanished again. I could hear my heartbeat. Not loud, just true. The linen around me had gathered warmth. I shifted, and coolness met my skin. Familiar. Inviting. This in-between was not an interruption. It was an interlude. The kind that doesn't need to be filled, only noticed. I stood and walked barefoot to the slit in the wall. Night air met my face, carrying the faint scent of rosemary and clay. The stars had moved. I could see the change. Time had passed, but not rushed. Below, the garden lay in shadow, still, but not asleep. A breeze stirred the olive branches. One leaf fell, slowly, without sound. Back in bed, I rested my hands on my chest, felt the rise, the fall. No need to count, just to witness. I thought of the others. Did they wake too? Did the child dream of goats again? Did the old servant check the bread oven for warmth? Maybe we all woke, at different times, in different corners. Sharing, the same hush without knowing it. I imagined the house breathing, not through windows or doors, but through us, through the ones inside. Breath as architecture, sleep as design. The pillow under my neck resisted my weight, but gave just enough. The blanket slid slightly to the floor. I let it go. In this quiet, I remembered a line someone once said. In the middle of sleep, we meet ourselves. It felt true. Thoughts rose. Not sharp, not urgent. Just thoughts. Of home. Of a friend's voice. Of a candle I once watched burn for hours without needing anything. Then quiet again. No effort. No direction. A kind of peace that doesn't arrive until everything else has passed through. I didn't try to sleep. I just waited. Trusted the rhythm that had held so many before me. Romans didn't fear the quiet between sleeps. They embraced it. Gave it a name. Honored it. This wasn't restlessness. It was a return. Eventually, the heaviness came back. Not like a weight, but like a fog. Soft, inevitable. The lamp flickered once, then stilled. And I lay down, gently, like a scroll being rolled shut. Sleep came again. Second sleep. Welcome. Deep. And I didn't need to ask why. Waking in the villa was different from waking anywhere else. It didn't happen all at once. It moved in stages. First the air changed, then the sound, then the light. And then, finally, your body remembered it was time to rise. I didn't open my eyes immediately. I wanted to feel the morning before I saw it. There was warmth where the sun had touched the stone outside and passed it into the walls. The linen blanket had shifted, exposing one arm, now tingling with coolness. Somewhere in the distance, a bowl was being set down on a table, not dropped, placed. With care, the sounds came like waves, spaced apart, a footstep on tile, the hush of sweeping, the creak of a wooden shutter being opened, a bird's call, uncertain at first, then steady. The house did not wake like a person. It woke like a garden, one bloom at a time. I turned my head on the pillow. The oil lamp beside me was long cold, its wick curled like a leaf in autumn. The room had shifted in color, from deep gray to gentle gold, and I opened my eyes. The villa, I had come to learn, was more than stone in design. It was rhythm. It had its own way of breathing, of stretching, of blinking awake. A servant walked past the doorway, barefoot, carrying fresh bread in a cloth bundle. He glanced in and nodded, not to greet me, but to acknowledge the moment. Another sound. The ladle in the water basin. Someone rinsing their hands, readying for the fire. I sat up slowly, careful not to break the spell. The bed creaked, the floor cooled my soles, and the air smelled faintly of olive wood and dust. No one rushed. Even the dogs in the courtyard still lay curled, blinking only when the sun found them. In the kitchen, fire was being coaxed back to life. A soft rhythm of breath and ember. The household altar had been refreshed, new crumbs left in offering, a flower placed at its base. The gods, too, had stirred. I wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and walked toward the corridor. The light there was stronger, slanted, honest. The mosaics on the floor had caught it, tiny tesserae now glinting, as if they'd remembered their colors. Outside in the garden, the fig trees reached upward, their shadows longer than their limbs. The impluvium, once still, now rippled with the morning breeze. A leaf floated in its center, circling slowly. A girl poured wine into a cup, diluted with water from a clay jug. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. This moment was not about observation. It was about existence. The villa had woken. And so had I. No alarm. No summons. No clamor. Just the gentle certainty that it was morning, and we were part of it. And as I stood in the light, I realized that waking was not something you did alone here. You woke with the villa. There were no bells, no shouted orders, no trumpets. The day in the villa did not begin with sound. It began with motion. Slow, thoughtful motion. The cook appeared first, stepping into the kitchen with a cloth over her shoulder. She carried a bowl of figs and a head of garlic, humming something too old for words. Then the boy who swept the corridor, his broom worn, his sandals quieter than breath. He didn't look up. He was part of the floor by now. The master of the house had not risen yet, nor had his wife. Their chambers remained shaded, the curtain drawn. Morning had no authority there. The servants moved with purpose, but not urgency. Tasks happened in a rhythm, not a race. Water was fetched, not in pails, but in earthenware jars hugged close to the chest. Fire was fed, slowly, gently, never all at once. Bread was warmed, not baked fresh today. A choice made yesterday. A rest for today. I remained in the garden, watching, breathing. The fig tree nearest to me had dropped 2 fruits, one split open by its own ripeness. Ants had begun their work. A girl passed me carrying folded linen. She smiled without teeth, a kind of acknowledgement I had come to recognize. You are here. I see you. That is enough. I nodded back. In Rome, days were divided with precision, hours counted by shadow. But here in the villa, time softened, stretched. It wasn't that the villa didn't keep time. It simply didn't fear it. A sparrow landed near the edge of the impluvium, pecked once, then flew on. Ripples followed its wings. Breakfast came in pieces. Someone brought olives. Someone else, cheese wrapped in cloth. The wine had already been diluted. 3 parts water, 1 part sleep. I sat near the wall, letting the sun reach me slowly. It touched my arms first, then climbed my chest, then found my face. And I didn't move, not yet. A man began to sing while chopping herbs, not loud, not for anyone, just a tune he carried like a tool. Another swept the dust from the steps, dust that would return, as it always did. But still, he swept. Nothing was wasted. Even repetition had dignity. The master eventually emerged, his robe creased, his hair undone. He walked slowly, not because he was tired, but because the villa asked him to. He greeted no one directly, but his presence, like the sun, was enough. I followed him to the atrium. He paused by the altar, touched a coin to the ledge, and whispered a name. Not a prayer, a memory. Then he moved on. I returned to the garden, sat on a stool with uneven legs, and watched the day continue. A child laughed near the stable. Someone dropped a pot. No one yelled. It was a day like others, ordinary, boring, sacred. The villa had no ambition to be anything more, and in that, it found peace. I knew it was my last morning in the villa. The travel bags were folded by the wall. My sandals sat neatly by the threshold. There was no urgency, only awareness. I remained seated on the bed for a while. The room felt smaller than before, not in size, but in memory. Full of things I hadn't packed. The cubiculum had become a quiet friend. It knew my breath. My turning in the night, the pause before dreams, and now, I would leave it behind. The oil lamp on the low table was cold. Its bronze had darkened overnight. The wick, unburned, curved gently to the side like a question unanswered. I ran my hand across the mattress. The indent from my body was still faintly there. The blanket had shifted during the night, one corner drooping over the side. Nothing dramatic had happened in this room. No revelation, no climax. And yet, I had changed here. Not in words, in rhythm. Stood slowly and walked to the wall where light slipped through the upper slit. The rectangle of sky above had shifted color, soft blue with the first stretch of gold. I watched a bird fly past, wings steady. I imagined it flying the same path each day. The room, now bathed in the earliest sun, showed itself differently. The tiny cracks in the plaster, the brush of dust along the beam, the threadbare edge of the blanket, the slight tilt in the lamp's base. All things I hadn't noticed before, or perhaps had ignored. I picked up my tunic and folded it slowly. My fingers knew the fabric's folds without looking. A gesture repeated each morning, now felt for the last time. There was still warmth in the floor where the sun had landed. I stood in it, let it reach my knees. I looked once more at the pillow. So firm, so unchanging. It had held my head without question, without complaint. I nodded to it, a quiet farewell. I moved to the door but didn't step through. Instead, I turned, took one last glance. Not out of sentiment, but recognition. This room had taught me something no words could hold. That stillness is not the absence of life, but the container of it. I placed my hand on the frame. Wood, worn smooth, by generations, not sacred but familiar. The cubiculum would hold the next sleeper, and the one after that, and each would bring new breath to its silence. I stepped out, but a part of me remained, folded into the quiet. I left through the garden, not through the front atrium, not with ceremony, just a quiet step beyond the vines and low stone walls that had held the villa close. The path curved gently downhill, worn by sandals, bare feet, time. As I walked, I kept looking back, not to return, but to remember how things looked when you leave them. The fig trees still clung to the morning. Their shadows were short now. The impluvium reflected only sky. The house no longer needed to reflect me. The air changed beyond the olive grove. It smelled of earth, sharper, freer. I passed the edge where the household's reach faded. No more swept stones, no more cut grass. Just the path. There was no sound but that of my own steps and the breeze threading between cypress trunks. The villa disappeared behind me, slowly. First the roof, then the edge of the wall, then only memory. It did not wave goodbye. It did not need to. I passed a shepherd leading goats up the ridge. He nodded once. I returned it. Neither of us spoke. Words didn't belong here. The road forked, and I took the lesser path, narrower, older. One stone loose, another cracked. All familiar in their unfamiliarity. I thought about how many people had walked this way, carrying bread, carrying silence, carrying dreams that lingered longer than they meant to. The sun was higher now. Not hot yet, but promising to be. My shadow walked ahead of me, a little longer than before. I stopped beside a small grove and sat on a stone, warmed, already by the morning light. From here, I could not see the villa, but I could feel it. In the way I sat, in the way I exhaled, in the way I let the quiet hold me. The sleep I had found there was not just sleep. It was a different way of being, a slower breath, a shared silence. I thought of the oil lamp, the pillow, the hands of servants lighting flames, before dark. I thought of dreams that weren't mine, yet found me anyway. I thought of the gods, not loud or demanding, but present. I thought of stone warmed by sun, not by fire, and I realized I hadn't left anything behind. The villa was no longer a place I had visited. It had become a rhythm I had learned, and now, carried with me, I stood again, brushed dust from my robe, walked on. The road turned once more, and then the trees opened to a field. A man was tending rows of vines. A woman filled a jar from a stream. Children ran barefoot behind a donkey cart, laughing at nothing. Life had returned to noise, but gentle noise, lived in sound. I would find another bed tonight, another roof, another silence. But part of me would always know how to find my way back. Not with maps, not with memory, but with stillness. Because once you've learned to sleep in a Roman villa, you carry it inside you. Not all mornings feel the same. After leaving the villa, I stayed in a small outbuilding near a farmstead. Nothing grand, just a room with a cot, a jug of water, and walls that remembered fewer voices. It was still early when I arrived, and I slept again. But this time, it was different. The quiet here was not curated. It was not woven into routine or stone. It simply was. Empty in places where the villa had been full. I lay on the cot, my back pressing into the uneven straw beneath the cloth. There was no oil lamp, Only sunlight and dust. The window was small, a square in the stone, unshuttered. The light came through freely, as if it had nothing to ask. I could hear the wind, but not as I knew it before. This was the wind of open fields, looser, rougher, less refined, and through it came sound, distant chickens, a yawn from someone nearby, a cart's wheel hitting stone, the sound of a place that had not been shaped by time, but lived through it. There was no incense here, no marble mosaics, only the creak of wood, the breath of wheat outside, the soft scrape of sandals passing by. Let myself listen. Let the difference settle. The room didn't hold me the way the cubiculum had. It didn't try to. It expected nothing. And in that, I found something new. The smell of hay mixed with morning bread. A single bee drifted through the window, circled, then left. I watched the shadow of the vine outside crawl slowly across the wall. Time, now marked, not by structure, but by drift. I didn't miss the villa, but I missed the way it had taught me to listen. So, I tried again here, to hear the cracks in this room's silence, to hear the life between the noises. A broom swept the earth outside. Not tile, not marble, just dust, and each pass sang softly with friction. A goat coughed. A child laughed. The door creaked with weathered memory. None of these sounds were elegant, but all were true. I closed my eyes and let the day speak around me. There were no rituals here, no formal goodbyes to dreams, but still, I felt held, maybe not by walls, but by wind, and grain, and motion. The pillow was thinner, the bed less forgiving, but the air was kind, open. I thought about what I had carried from the villa. Not objects, not words, but rhythm, slowness, reverence for pause. And here, I tried to practice it again. I let my breathing match the breeze through the window. Let my limbs sink without demand. Let the noise rise and fall like tide. This was not sleep, but something near it, a rest between destinations, a half-dream. And in it, I heard a new kind of silence. The silence of places not designed for rest, but still offering it. The quiet of being unobserved. The kind of silence that doesn't mind if you leave no mark. I didn't know how long I lay. There, the shadow moved. The bee returned. A cup clinked. When I opened my eyes, the room had changed color, and I understood. Rest was not just where you slept. It was how you listened. The first night at the villa didn't seem important when it happened. It had been a long day. Travel, dust, quiet greetings. I was shown to the cubiculum by a servant who didn't speak. He simply opened the door, nodded, and left. The room was plain. The bed was small. The lamp was already lit. I remember standing in the doorway, not stepping in right away. I was used to softer things, beds that welcomed, rooms that filled the air with familiarity. This room waited. I sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress didn't give much. The blanket was folded precisely, the pillow barely more than a roll. The lamp flickered, casting a shape on the far wall I didn't recognize at first, a shadow that shifted with me, but never fully aligned. I undressed slowly, not from weariness, but hesitation. Something about the space asked for care. I folded my clothes the way I saw others do, set them near the bed, touched the edge of the oil lamp, warm, humming with small flame. I lay down, and the silence began. Not absence, not void, just unfamiliar quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't empty the air, but changes its shape. I could hear myself breathe. Hear the floor creak under the movement of someone passing outside. I remember wondering how many had slept here before me. How many had thought these same thoughts, felt this same stillness. The pillow surprised me. Not for its comfort, there was none, but for how quickly it accepted me. I shifted once, then stopped. The walls didn't echo, they held. I watched the ceiling, plain stone, no fresco, no color, and I felt something settle, not in the room, but in me. The air cooled slightly after midnight. A breeze moved through the slit in the wall, bringing the scent of olives and smoke. And somewhere beyond the garden, a voice murmured something. A lullaby, maybe. Or just a word. I didn't sleep quickly, but when I did, it came gently. A dream, if there was one, did not stay. I woke once in the night, not startled, just unsure. I remember sitting up, rubbing my hands together, touching the corner of the bed frame. The lamp had burned out. The darkness was complete, but I wasn't afraid. The room held me. I remember the sound of cloth moving in the next room, someone turning, a door creaking softly. I remember not minding. And then I slept again, second sleep, quiet, deep. In the morning, I woke before the rest. The sky was gray, the walls glowed with coming light, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace? Maybe, but quieter than that. Permission. To be still. To belong. That was the first night. I wouldn't understand its weight until many nights later. When the room had become a rhythm, when sleep had become not an escape, but a return. Now looking back, that first night seems like an invitation, one I accepted without knowing. A whisper. Stay. Listen. Become. And I did. Some mornings never really leave you. Years pass, places change, but certain mornings stay behind your eyes. Quiet, whole, undisturbed. There was one morning at the villa I remember more clearly than most. I had slept well, deeply, the kind of sleep that lingers around your shoulders even after you rise. The sun hadn't yet touched the garden, but the air held light. I woke with the sense of being watched, not by people, but by peace itself. Everything was exactly as I had left it the night before. The lamp, empty. The blanket creased, the pillow slightly warm. But something in the air had shifted. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long while, not dressing, not thinking, just sitting, letting the morning come through me. The room didn't feel separate anymore. It felt worn in, like a robe I'd slept in for years. Outside, the sound of a broom brushing stone. Soft, measured, then a bird. Its first call hesitant, as if it wasn't sure the day had truly begun. I stepped into my sandals, still cool from the night air. The floor gave no resistance. My steps made no announcement. The hallway was empty, the columns dappled with gray-blue shadow. I remember passing the altar in the atrium. A curl of incense still drifted upward. Someone had made an offering already, figs maybe, or a coin. The gods were awake. In the kitchen, a servant hummed. Another sliced cheese. The morning meal had not yet begun. There was no gathering, only preparation. But the kind of preparation that breathes, not scrambles. I stepped into the garden and stood at the edge of the impluvium. The water was smooth. Perfect. No ripple. My reflection was clear, sleep still clinging to my face, my eyes soft with silence. A fig had fallen. Ants had found it. There was something holy in their procession. I crouched and touched the rim of the basin. Cool. Damp. The dew had not yet burned off, and I realized I hadn't spoken a word since waking. nor had I needed to. Everything I might say was already spoken by stone and light and breath. That morning, I didn't eat with the others. I stayed in the garden, let the sun climb my arms and neck, then settle on my back. Time didn't vanish. It unfolded. I don't remember what I thought about, only that I did so slowly. No rush to conclusions, no race toward meaning. I watched a leaf float down and land on the surface of the water, watched it spin once, then rest. The house didn't ask anything of me. It simply included me, and I accepted. Sometimes I think the entire memory fits in the shape of that one leaf on the water. Not a story, not a lesson, just presence. I carry that morning still, not in words, in breath. Stillness is not something taught. It is something remembered. The villa never said this out loud, but it showed it each day. I remember a day when I had nowhere to be. No task, no meal awaiting, no person expecting me. And so, I stayed in the same square of the garden from morning to near dusk, not out of laziness, not fatigue, but because that day was teaching me stillness. It began with a bench, stone, lichen-covered, cool from the night. I sat with both feet flat on the ground, my hands in my lap, my eyes open, but soft. At first, I thought I would only stay a short while, but the morning passed slowly, and so did I. The shadows shifted gently along the path. Light moved between leaves like water through fingers. A single fig dropped from a branch. I didn't flinch. An ant climbed over my foot. I let it pass. Stillness, I found, was not the absence of movement, but the quieting of response. It allowed the world to continue without interruption, without my need to shape it. A servant passed once, glanced toward me, kept walking. She did not disturb me. She recognized something sacred in what I was doing, or perhaps in what I was not doing. The day continued. Birdsong came in clusters, then quiet, then again. I watched a line of ants rebuild, a path they had used before. Watched them hesitate, reform, continue. Their diligence mirrored my stillness, a kind of mutual understanding. Around noon, a breeze stirred the ivy behind me. The leaves whispered a rhythm that repeated and repeated until I could no longer tell if I was hearing or remembering. My body softened. My thoughts slowed. My breath deepened without trying. There was no sleep, but it was not wakefulness either. A third state. A kind of presence so deep it forgot to name itself. And in that, I realized something. Stillness does not mean emptiness. It means saturation, of light, of air, of self. I watched my own shadow stretch, then shorten, then stretch again. Time moved without pushing. A child came into the garden, dropped a seed, and left. A bird landed where the seed had been, pecked, moved on. No one needed my attention. Nothing asked for my reaction. Stillness welcomed me not as an observer, but as a participant. Eventually, my back began to ache. My legs tingled. But I stayed a little longer, just to be sure I hadn't missed anything. I hadn't. The lesson had already settled. Later, I rose, walked once around the garden, returned to my room. It was unchanged, and so was I, but also not. There was a space inside me now that hadn't been there before, or perhaps it had, and I had simply uncovered it. A stillness that moved when I didn't, a lesson the villa never wrote down, but inscribed on the breath. Not every place follows you when you leave, but some do. Long after I'd returned home, after the roads, the markets, the shifting towns, the villa remained. Not in pictures, not in maps, but in the way I walked, in how I closed doors gently, in the way I listened before I spoke. What remains after sleep? It's not the dreams. Those fade. It's not the pillow, the blanket, or the flickering lamp. It's the silence, the rhythm. The part of you that became softer because you allowed stillness to shape you. I found myself waking earlier, not from alarms, but from light, from breath. I folded my clothes with more care, sat longer before standing, drank water slowly like it had meaning. Even in noise, I searched for quiet edges. The villa had taught me not to rush. Not because time was slow there, but because attention moved differently. I remembered the way light slid across stone, the way a servant placed a fig without sound, the weight of breath in the second sleep. Those weren't memories. They were instructions. Now in my own room, my own bed, I let the lamp burn longer. I listened to the stillness between thoughts. Sometimes I dreamed of the cubiculum, though it never looked exactly the same. Once I dreamed of the path behind the garden. The trees whispered the same words I had never fully understood, and I didn't need to. That, too, was something I had learned. Not all quiet must be explained. What remains after sleep is the body remembering softness, the mind rehearsing peace. Even in the hardest days, something in me paused before moving. That pause was the villa. It stayed, not as a place, but as a shape. I shaped my rest differently, sat with fatigue, let it speak before I silenced it. I understood that waking was not the opposite of sleep, only another breath in the same body. The oil lamp, the folded robe, the crack in the plaster, these were gone. But the memory of them had weight. What remains after sleep is not proof, but presence. It's what your hands remember doing, even if your mind forgets. And so, even now, in a world far from Rome, I still find moments where the villa returns, when a shadow moves across a tiled floor, when a bird sings before the sun, when someone says my name only once and I answer without hurry. It taught me that sleep is not an end. It's a door that opens both ways, and the places we rest in, truly rest, walk with us after we go. That is what remains, not dreams, but the way we carry silence forward. You've just listened to Memories from a Bomb Shelter, a sleep story from the series History for Sleep. This episode was written to be felt, not just heard. A story woven from silence, light, and shared breath. If this story brought you calm, comfort, or curiosity, you're warmly invited to return. New journeys into quiet history arrive each week, to dream again, to rest, to remember. Leave a gentle word in the comments. Let us know where you're listening from. You are not alone here. Until next time, sleep softly, and may the past keep you safe tonight.